there is no known cure for PCOS. I wish there was. I have helped a lot of people to fully reverse their symptoms, have great looking blood work. But in order to do that, they do have to make choices every day that are maybe different than what they would like naturally want to do. So that's not a cure. It is management of symptoms, really effective management.
Welcome to the Naked Wellness Podcast. As a qualified nutritionist, I'm here to strip away the nonsense and get down to the bare essentials of nutrition and wellness. Join us as we debunk myths, chat with top-notch experts, and serve up practical tips that will leave you feeling empowered. Get ready to uncover the naked truth about living your healthiest life. Let's undress. Welcome to the Naked Wellness Podcast. Today I have a special guest with me. I have Amber Fischer. Amber is a functional nutritionist who specialises in PCOS and infertility and works closely with her clients to actually help them find the root cause of their disease and dysfunction and guide them through getting to the other side. So I am so excited for our chat today, and welcome to the podcast, Amber.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's going to be amazing. Did you want to start off with giving us a bit of a rundown? Because I know that you do have a bit of a history and a bit of a story of your own journey. Did you want to share this with us and what kind of got you into this unique space in the health industry?
Sure. Yeah. So I have PCOS myself, and the health issues that I went through, especially in my early to mid 20s, were probably the major catalyst for me becoming a nutrition professional in the first place. I used to work in like social services, so I was not interested in nutrition at all, didn't grow up knowing anything about nutrition, but I was diagnosed with PCOS as a college student back in 2010. And that diagnosis was very scary and confusing for me. At the time, there wasn't a lot of information about the connection between PCOS and nutrition. And so I just wasn't getting a lot of answers. And so a lot of what I learned, I kind of cobbled together myself. But, I remember back then being told like, I might not be able to have children and things like that. And that was something that I wanted. And so it was just a very scary time. And it got me really inspired to learn about nutrition. I just kind of had a sixth sense that there was something more going on with it, that there was a connection there. And even though I kept being told, no, I don't know, I couldn't let it go. So I ended up deciding to go back to school and get a master's degree in nutrition just to kind of like pursue that thread a little bit more. And about the same time that I enrolled in my master's program, I actually was diagnosed with endometrial cancer as a consequence of some of my PCOS symptoms kind of coming to a head. So that was an extra little push nudge in the direction of really focusing on PCOS. Because I remember at the time feeling like, having a bit of imposter syndrome and feeling like I wasn't quite qualified to help with PCOS since I was dealing with it myself. But anyway, fast forward, it's been like 9 years now, and I've been doing this work. And I was able to kind of do all the things that I wanted to do in my life, was able to have a child and all that. But I definitely went through a lot of stuff with my PCOS journey. And so, it's very gratifying to be able to help other people.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the fact that you've been through the journey yourself and now you're helping so many other amazing people through it as well is really, really powerful, because it means you not only obviously understand from the science side of it and how to help them, but also you have that personal understanding and can really get what they're going through and how difficult it can be for some people who might be sitting on the side of this being like, what is PCOS? I'm not too sure. Do you want to give us the general gist of what PCOS is and what some symptoms of PCOS are?
Sure. So PCOS is it's a hormone condition. It's actually the most common gynecological condition. So it's very prevalent. I want to say that the most recent statistic is like 12% of women or something have, it's a lot of people who are dealing with PCOS, but more than a hormone condition, I actually think of it more as a metabolic condition, because a lot of what drives the hormonal imbalances is deeper in the body, more connected to the endocrine, metabolic condition and things related to that, which I'm sure we'll kind of touch on in a
Mhm.
bit. But some signs that you might have PCOS, you would have to meet something called the Rotterdam criteria, which is a diagnostic criteria. And it consists of having two of the three, either irregular periods or lack of ovulation, signs of hyperandrogenism. So that can be things like facial hair growth, sometimes like cystic acne and things like that. Sometimes they'll even count like carrying a lot of weight in the middle as a sign of hyperandrogenism, and then polycystic ovaries on ultrasound. So one of the things that's kind of funny about PCOS is that you don't necessarily have to have polycystic ovaries to have PCOS. And that just kind of goes back again to how much of a metabolic rather than, purely hormonal condition it really is. You live with PCOS your whole life. So even after you go through menopause, or if you have a, hysterectomy or anything like that, you still have PCOS, and there are, lifelong sort of chronic health condition things that you deal with when you have PCOS. So,
And so you only have to have out of those
two of
three
the
to be
three,
diagnosed.
yeah.
Okay,
And
cool.
sometimes, like with the hyperandrogenism one,
Yeah.
they often diagnose that based on symptoms alone. So it's some folks with PCOS don't even have like high testosterone on labs, but their bodies are showing signs of hyperandrogenism, like facial hair growth or excess body hair growth, cystic acne, things like that. So it's kind of a murky condition. I mean, I know one of the things we were kind of talking about is like, well, what's the cause of PCOS? Like, what causes it? And that the frustrating thing about it is because it is so murky, there really is no known cause for it. I mean, there's obviously a genetic component, and those who have a family history of PCOS, more likely to have it, but there are also folks who don't have a family history of PCOS who develop it. I have theories on that. I don't know if you want me to go into them, but I just think we all kind of get thrown into a little bit of a basket, the PCOS basket, and we may all be a little bit different coming at it from different places, but we end up with similar symptoms, and so that's why they put it here.
For sure. And so going down the path to get diagnosed with
Yeah.
PCOS, because I've personally met quite a few people who have gone to so many doctors who have been like, no, it's not that, it's not that, it's not that. And then they find one doctor who's like, yes, it is PCOS. Because obviously, as you're saying, there is that murky ground, that murky area where maybe the blood tests don't come back and say that the testosterone is high, but the body is suggesting otherwise with facial hair or cystic acne. So what is the best way to go about actually getting diagnosed with PCOS?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think sometimes we do. I mean, it obviously depends where you live in the world, but I know here in the United States, sometimes we have to do what we call doctor hopping, just trying to find somebody who will listen, because oftentimes, I think particularly with PCOS, sometimes doctors are a little bit hesitant to even pursue that thread because there's not a whole lot they can do for it.
Yeah.
And a lot of doctors have the misconception that PCOS is only present in women who are overweight or obese, or that it's only worth kind of treating or using some of the medications like metformin that they like to prescribe if it's one of those circumstances. And so oftentimes, folks who develop PCOS as they age, which sometimes happens, or those who don't meet like the standard box view of what PCOS looks like, will be dismissed. So it's a little bit of a struggle sometimes to get that diagnosis. Sometimes I recommend, asking for a referral to an endocrinologist, and just kind of continuing to advocate for yourself, because since there's not a whole lot that can be done for it from the medical side, sometimes you have to really kind of push a little bit to get your diagnosis. The great thing about PCOS, though, is that most of what actually helps with PCOS is actually lifestyle change and nutrition and all that kind of stuff. So that actually makes a much bigger difference than any medication that can be currently prescribed or anything like that. So once you know you have it, you can sort of follow that pathway. If you suspect that you have PCOS, you have a strong feeling about it, you feel that you meet most of the criteria, but you're maybe not able to get your diagnosis, it really doesn't hurt to follow a lot of the PCOS nutrition recommendations. At the end of the day, they're basically healthy eating recommendations, so it's not going to like harm you to eat your vegetables and get enough protein. Those are things that everybody should be doing. And so if they help, if you see improvements in your symptoms, you'll know that you're on the right path anyway. So you may as well just kind of maybe even think about working with like a dietitian or a nutritionist if you're banging your head against the wall and not getting any answers.
Yeah, 100%. And those improvements would be things around the acne or, yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest improvements that I tend to see early on when a diet protocol is working would be clearing up of skin. That's a big one. Weight changes, usually reduction in weight, but sometimes when I'm working with people, they're coming to maybe not to lose weight, but because they are having difficulty maintaining stability with their weight. Like they're going up and down and it's very out of control, or they have out of control weight gain and nothing that they do seems to work. And so typically, that's related to some of these underlying sort of root issues. And if you can get a grasp on those, you'll start to see improvements and progress with that type of symptom. Other great signs would be like improved digestive function. Usually the facial hair stuff takes longer. The irregular periods tend to take longer to kind of sync up, depending on how far apart yours are to begin with. If they're very far apart, it may take longer. If they're fairly close together, you may be able to kind of get them under control with just a little bit of tweaking. So that kind of stuff really depends on the person, but you'll notice changes.
And I guess it's about giving it long enough for it to work and to take time and to be patient with things as well. I guess the body's literally learning how to regulate and work, and it's not a switch that we can just flick. I mean, it'd be great if it was, but it's not.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're dealing with a chronic health issue, I think you go through a grieving process when you're, diagnosed with it, because you do have to sort of mourn the idea that you can dip your toe slightly in the water of working on something. With PCOS, if you want to really make a difference in your symptomology, you can't just do it halfway. You can't just kind of, I mean, it's great to make changes over time. That's totally valid. And I think it's important to take the time to grieve and go through that whole process of like getting to the acceptance point. But you also have to be consistent and you have to put in the work, and it's a daily, choice that you have to make to like choose to set up your plate appropriately for PCOS, for example, or to eat enough protein or whatever. There's simple things, but as you know, and probably a lot of your listeners know, it's one thing to know it, and then it's another thing to actually like do it, and then to do it all the time is even more than that. So it's always progress over perfection, but yeah, there's a consistency piece that definitely has to happen.
Yeah, 100%. Like literally changing your lifestyle to fit and suit this. It can be overwhelming for a lot of people as well. But if we were to start with, I guess, the nutrition side of everything, what are some of those biggest changes that somebody with PCOS has to make, or what does that PCOS-friendly diet look like?
Sure. So PCOS symptoms tend to originate from kind of like three main places. And I talk a lot about PCOS root drivers. I don't necessarily like to call them root causes anymore because I think it gets people a little bit confused. But what drives your symptoms are sort of three metabolic issues. It's insulin resistance, which is probably about upwards of 80% of folks with PCOS. Inflammation, which is almost everybody who's dealing with PCOS, and then adrenal dysfunction, maybe around 40 to 50% of folks with PCOS. So these three sort of issues all have overlapping nutrition recommendations, but then they also differ from each other. So depending on where your symptoms are coming from and what's like your root cause, where's your symptoms coming from, you may need to focus more in one area than another. But generally, a diet that is moderate to high in protein is going to be key, because that's going to help slow the release of, insulin and sugar into the bloodstream. It's going to improve your body's insulin response. There's a feedback loop that happens when we eat protein that's really helpful for insulin sensitivity. And alongside that, and equally as important, is a diet that's high in plant foods and fiber. So you need to have, ample vegetables, fruits. I generally like the lower sugar fruits are better. They have more nutrition content, like things like berries and stuff. But you need fruits, you need vegetables, you need whole grains or foods that are going to be high in fiber. Legumes are a great one as well, because the fiber helps to slow that blood sugar response, and it helps your body excrete old hormones. It helps your gut bacteria, which then help with your inflammation. Like, there's so many jobs that fiber specifically does for PCOS. I almost think it's like the unsung hero of a PCOS-friendly diet. So my general recommendations as far as like amounts is like 20 to 30 grams protein at each meal, 30 grams of fiber minimum throughout the day, if you can get around there. And again, it's not like you don't have to be perfect, right? But if you can change your diet to be more in that direction, you'll definitely start to see improvements. From there, I mean, the biggest thing is just as much whole, unprocessed food as possible, and that's similar across like anybody, everyone. We should all be eating that way. Unfortunately, our world is not necessarily set up for that anymore, especially where I live, but we do our best. And, as much as we can focus on eating whole foods, it's always going to be an improvement over, anything else.
100%. And so when it comes to the protein side of things, what are some simple strategies? Because if you're wanting to be hitting that 20 to 30 grams for most of your meals, some people can be like, oh my God, how am I meant to get that in? Where do I even start with this? So what are some simple strategies that people can use to make sure that they are hitting that protein intake?
Sure. So I think sometimes there's a misconception about protein that it's only meat. And
Yes.
so folks who don't love meat are kind of like, how do I do that? About 30 grams of protein is about half of a chicken breast, if you're just looking at like pure protein, animal protein, whatever. So for most people, eating half a chicken breast at, lunch or dinner is not that much of a stretch, right? A lot of us do that anyway. But if it is, if you more tend towards like, a vegetarian diet, the best way to get enough protein is to focus on your secondary sources of protein, right? So I do think most folks with PCOS benefit from having some animal protein in the diet, but it doesn't have to be like everything. You can do some fish and stuff like that. And then you can also add in secondary sources, like legumes are a great source of protein. Quinoa is a great source of protein. Tofu is a great source of protein. So all of those things add to your protein total as well. And, if you count everything up for a day just based off of what you're normally eating, oftentimes you're getting enough already, or you may just need to make some tweaks. Dairy products can also be a great source of protein if you tolerate them. So I think it's one of the things I usually suggest to people is to write down everything that they eat on like an average day. Take like a food log of just your average every day, and then kind of count up what you're doing. How much protein are you eating? How much fiber are you eating? And once you have that data, you can use that to kind of tweak and add and subtract from different areas. And that prevents you from having to track every single thing you're eating every day. If you just take like a 24-hour food log every few weeks or every few months or something like that, you can just check in on yourself and then plan accordingly. But yeah, it's not, I think it's not too hard to get protein, in my opinion, in my personal opinion. I don't know.
Yeah.
My clients tell me differently though.
I think you just gotta think beyond just the meat, right? And as soon as you
Right.
recognize and realize how many other foods still also have that protein in it, it kind of takes a lot of that stress and that pressure off. You're like, oh, okay, not every meal has to be a piece of steak or a piece of chicken breast. There's so many
Right.
different ways that it can be tasty and delicious. And at the end of the day, it doesn't, it's only as hard as you make it. And I feel when it comes to a lot of nutrition things, we always try and overcomplicate everything. If we actually take it right back to basics and go with, like you said, the whole foods that are there, that are accessible, we can add flavors to so things taste good. You're going to be so fine with staying interested and finding it quite easy to add those protein in, which is
Yeah,
amazing.
absolutely. I think a lot of things with nutrition are like you said,
Yeah.
it's as simple or as difficult as you make it.
Yeah.
And it's okay to take your time making changes too. Everybody's coming from a different place.
Yeah.
As a working in private practice, I've seen that.
Mm.
Sometimes I have clients come in and they grew up literally on just fast food, fried food. Like they never ate a home cooked meal. And then I have people who are coming to me and they were raised vegan, and so it's like two
So
totally
different.
different paradigms. There's shifts and adjustments that each person
Yeah.
has to make, but for the person who is raised in a, already eating a lot of vegetables and fruit, it's not as difficult of a change as for the person who never ate any of
True.
that and maybe even has food aversions to a lot of that
Yeah.
stuff, or textural or sensory issues with some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So that person's journey may take longer,
Yeah.
um, and that's okay. Like, have grace for yourself where you're at, but it's just like one step at a time, and one foot in front of the other, and you'll get there eventually.
100%, little by little, a little bit becomes a lot. And I think this is where it's so important for you to almost stay tunnel visioned in your journey and your goals that you have, and not comparing yourself to anyone else and what they're going through. I know that you touched on inflammation in the body and how people with PCOS really struggle with the inflammation, or a lot of pretty much everyone with PCOS has that inflammation. What are some ways to start to reduce inflammation in the body?
Sure. So inflammation is definitely a complex topic because there's a lot of moving pieces with it. The reason we get inflamed in PCOS also varies. So if we're very insulin resistant, it can make us more inflamed, because having that excess, those blood sugar swings is very inflammatory. Holding a lot of excess body fat in the abdomen can be, for some people, inflammatory. And then having a really stressed out, like if your adrenals are really stressed, right, that can be inflammatory. But the biggest place that I tend to see inflammation come from in PCOS is related to the health of the gut, the health of the microbiome, which are the bacteria that live in the gut. And there's a big connection between PCOS and something that's called leaky gut, or intestinal permeability is the fancy way to say it. But basically, we tend to struggle more with higher levels of quote unquote bad bacteria, less bacteria overall, so less diversity, and more of this, more of these like microscopic sort of tears in the gut wall. And over time, what that can do is lead to the development of food sensitivities, and those food sensitivities can then sort of feed out into an inflammatory, almost like it's a food sensitivity reaction. So it's an immune reaction to certain foods. And that can be very inflammatory. So the place where I tend to like to start is with adding in more foods that are kind of gut friendly or helpful for the gut on an anti-inflammatory diet. So these are things like
Mhm.
fatty fish, right? Like
Yeah.
fatty fish, sardines, salmon, cod, like all of that is huge, very important, very effective for a lot of different PCOS symptoms, but inflammation being one of them, and great for the gut bacteria. Probiotic foods, foods like kefir and, really well done yogurt, things like that. Kombucha, sauerkraut, those things can be helpful in the right person. And then the biggest thing is, again, fiber and plant foods. It's like, constantly saying the same thing, but fiber is really the food for our beneficial gut bacteria. we have enough gut bacteria that feed on saturated fats and that feed on, some of these other things that sugar and the things that we love to eat, right? But we don't tend to have enough of the bacteria that feed on the polyphenols from, plant content. So we have to work on eating more of those foods, because if we feed those bacteria, they're like little pets. We have to give them their food, and then they grow, and then they make more of themselves. And then we have a better balance. And when we have a better balance in the gut can heal itself. We can start to repair some of these issues. That's the simple answer. The longer answer is, it can get a little complicated if you've been dealing with gut issues for a long time. And sometimes fiber is like painful and all of that. But if you start there, that's a great place to kind of begin. Something like the Mediterranean diet, the official Mediterranean diet that the research studies are kind of based on, that is a great, starting place.
Mm-hmm. I love how before you said it kind of all overlaps a little bit, each of these areas, and it definitely does. Hey, and I just think that it's just going back to focusing on those whole foods and really making sure that you're adding in rather than removing as well. And I love that kind of mindset, because I feel like when a lot of people get diagnosed with something and they have to make these changes, a lot of the time, especially doctors, tell them to start cutting out X, Y, and Z, or to go on this diet. And it's really overwhelming and a little bit scary as well, because like, oh my goodness, I've always eaten X, Y, and Z and now I can't have it anymore. But everything that you're saying and the approach that you're taking is, we're just actually adding in. We're adding in more fruits and veggies. We're adding in that fiber. We're adding in the protein, adding in the probiotics, which I just think is such a healthy and a holistic way of looking at your nutrition and the way that you eat.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've done it the other way, like I've been there, done that. I did that with myself and forced myself to kind of like, I've done keto. When I was very first in nutrition, I put people through a keto diet. Sorry to my early clients. I mean, I know a lot of things now because I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I've kind of come to a more balanced place after seeing this in real people. And, understanding that there's a lot of nuance with health and science and nutrition. And the cool thing about adding stuff in is, especially if you're adding in more fiber and more protein and more whole foods, they take up a lot of space in the stomach, and they alter your hunger signals and cues. And so you end up getting to the same place that your doctor said to get to anyway, eating less sugar and, whatever else the doctor says to do. You end up getting there, but without feeling like, they've taken away everything that you love. Because it's never that black and white. There's always gray area when it comes to nutrition and like how much of something is healthy and what moderation really means and looks like. So yes, I fully agree with you.
Yeah, 100%. And it just allows you to maintain that healthy relationship with food and feel like you're not missing out, and you can still do all of the things that you want to do in your life, which is important. What would you say are some of the biggest myths or misconceptions that you do hear about PCOS?
Yeah, misconceptions about PCOS. I mean, I think a big one is that, well, there's kind of two sides of the same coin. Sometimes I hear people say like if you just go gluten and dairy free, or you just do like this weird, diet or whatever, you can cure your PCOS. Or on the other hand, then we've got a lot of people saying like there's nothing that can be done. PCOS is a chronic health condition. I even heard somebody not too long ago say, because PCOS is a chronic health condition, it's like destined to just get worse as you age. And I'm like, that's so defeating and like hopeless. Like, I don't know why you would say that. Anyway, that really rubbed me the wrong way. But both sides are incorrect. The truth is somewhere in the middle. Like there is no known cure for PCOS. I wish there was. I have helped a lot of people to fully reverse their symptoms, have great looking blood work. But in order to do that, they do have to make choices every day that are maybe different than what they would like naturally want to do, right? So that's not a cure. It is management of symptoms, really effective management. On the same token, like it's obvious that, if we make nutrition changes, it affects the way that our insulin responds. It affects the way that, how inflamed we are, things like that. And we know that from the research. So to say that there's no connection there, that there's nothing that can be done, is really ignorant, and it doesn't actually make a lot of sense if you kind of understand the way that food works in the body. So both of those things are probably the biggest misconceptions I see. Another one that I see a lot of is that you'll never be able to get pregnant with PCOS. Really, most folks with PCOS, if they want to have children, are able to, by some means. In fact, a lot of us don't even need to use fertility treatments, but if you do, you have great outcomes. I had my son through IVF, and those with PCOS tend to have great results with IVF or other fertility treatments. We tend to be like the ideal kind of patient for those protocols. So there are methods and ways of getting pregnant. And I think almost like worrying about that piece can be more damaging to your fertility than anything, because that stress is so hard on your body. So just know the statistics are on your side if you want to get pregnant with PCOS. You may need a little help, but there's no shame in that, right? And then I guess the only other one I can think of off the kind of top of my head right now is that PCOS only affects people who are, overweight, which it absolutely does. And like we're all part of the same club here, like not leaving them out. But there is this group of folks with PCOS who do, I think, get like kind of ignored, and that's the ones who are very thin or low normal weight who have PCOS. They tend to get dismissed a lot and not really get answers because they don't look like what you would traditionally think of with PCOS. And so PCOS really has no connection, no real connection to your weight. I think about 40% of those with PCOS are not overweight at all. So it's about half and half. It really doesn't connect, except for the fact that some of the symptoms can lead to weight gain. That is true, but yeah.
I think it's really interesting because it's challenging this idea that in order to have something, you have to actually look a certain way, which I think is so wrong. And in the society that we live in, I definitely think there needs to be a shift away from this, that your body and the way that you look and how much weight you have should never justify the treatment that you get or whether you do or don't have something. Everyone is entitled to identifying what it is for them individually. And so I do think that is definitely like a huge misconception that
and I mean, it goes both ways. A lot of my clients who are overweight come to me and they can't get any help because the only solution that their doctor ever has for them is to lose 10 pounds or whatever. And it's not to say that weight loss isn't can't be part of the picture, because sometimes it is part of the picture, but it's not the weight loss that's like making the changes. You know what I mean? It's like the weight loss is happening as a result of the lifestyle changing and going in a completely different direction, and the body is just responding to that. So yeah, you look different, but that's not what's different,
Exactly.
that's not the core of it. So
yeah, I completely agree. No, I love it. Now, I do have some quick fire questions for you. Are you ready for these?
I'm ready.
What is one thing that you must do every morning to set your day up?
Okay, I always have to start my day with a matcha latte. I'm somewhat addicted to matcha lattes. I never got into drinking coffee, and I used to not drink any caffeine. And then I started, then I had a child and I started drinking matcha lattes, and now I'm like obsessed. I can't start my day without it, but
Delicious.
It's good for me. So
absolutely. What is one thing everyone can do every day to improve their life?
I think a big piece of, especially if you have PCOS, that you can do to improve your life is to find an activity, like a some type of movement that you actually like to do. So I take salsa dancing lessons. I've done pole dancing before. Just think outside the box with the activity. It brings a lot of joy to your life to move in a way that's fun.
I could not agree more. And I think for so many people, it's actually about thinking back to when you were a child. What did you used to do? Did you create games or obstacle courses outside? Did you roller skate? Did you play tag or chasey or play on the monkey bars? You still get to do that today. And I think so many of us, especially women, we get into this state of we have to tick the next thing off the to-do list, or we'll go, or the next task has to be done, that we forget to stop and actually have fun and just play and just let that inner child out.
Yes, I so agree. I think so many of us get stuck in this rut of thinking that exercise has to be so
Yeah.
exercisey. Like we have to
Yeah.
go to like the gym and lift weights or whatever. And that's fine. Some people love that, and that's great. I don't personally love that. So I've had to find ways to build strength and to get my like movement in that feel like fun, like you said, like being a kid. I
Yeah.
loved to dance when I was a kid. And so now I'm like, oh, do it now, you know, and it's
Love it.
great. It makes you want to go and do it. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's good for you.
Absolutely. Yes. What is your favorite
So,
quote and why?
okay, I wrote down, I have a lot of favorite quotes, but this is one that's kind of been resonating for me lately. It's by John Lubbock,
Mm-hmm.
and it says, "Rest is not idleness, and to
Mm-hmm.
lie sometimes on the grass under trees is by no means a waste of time." And I just
Mm.
love that because I'm in a season of my life where where it's a little bit slower paced.
Yeah.
I'm a mom. I have a 4-year-old. I'm at home a lot more than I used to be. Since COVID, I like closed my in-person practice and I'm all virtual now. And so I've had to really get comfortable with silence and get comfortable with my own mind and realize that, you know, this constant need to push and achieve and do things is not necessarily what is making me happy. And it may just be a bit of a trauma response. So
Mm.
resting is not idleness, it's doing something. There's important work that happens while you're resting. So,
So powerful. Now, one question that I love to ask all my podcast guests is, in the distant future, when you're looking back at your life, what do you actually think will be one of your biggest achievements or something that you'll be most proud of? This could be something that you've already done, or it could also be something that you're hoping to do in the future.
yeah, this is another one that I've kind of been thinking about.
Mm.
And honestly, I feel that I've achieved a lot in a short period of time in my life. I just turned 35, so I feel like I've done a lot in my life, and I'm proud of the work that I've done with PCOS. I do think that that's one thing that I'll kind of go to my
Mm.
grave being proud of, that I was able to find a new perspective on a really frustrating and confusing condition and help a lot of people with it. I'm proud of the education work that I've been doing lately too. I'm proud of the private
Mm.
practice. I think also personally, what I'm the most proud of is the internal work that I've done on my own. Um, I'm like healing my own pain, you know, childhood trauma stuff, the therapy work that I've done, and just the way that I've been able to overcome, like I said, that sort of incessant need to be perfect, to achieve that, all that imposter syndrome, social anxiety, people pleasing stuff. The work that I've done on that has been really hard. It's also been very
Mm.
like quiet and not very public,
Mm.
but that I think has changed my life more than anything, and just allowed me to like be more grateful, more present. So
Sure.
probably that.
That's absolutely. And I feel like it's those, especially having a social media presence, right? Everybody can see these achievements that are posted, whether it's your client success or your business, your child, or whatever it is that you're sharing. But it's those ones that are going on behind the scenes, the person that you actually had to become to be able to create the rest of your life and to allow that to happen. And it's those achievements that you're the one who's celebrating in silence. So I think that's actually really powerful that you recognize that and are celebrating yourself for it, because that type of work is not easy, but it's necessary to be done to get to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, specifically with like the social media stuff, I mean, that was a big goal of mine, and I wanted
Mm.
to achieve, you know, I think everybody who's on social media does have that, like, obviously we want to help people and stuff, but we also want our work to be seen. We want to
Yeah.
be appreciated for what we do. And once I kind of like climbed that mountain and got to the top of it, it was a, kind of a difficult experience because I realized like, oh, this isn't actually what's going to make
Mm.
me like um, feel good about myself, or it's not the validation or other people telling me, oh, you're
Yeah.
great at this, or you've helped me so much, or anything. That's not really what's going to do it for me. I have to do
Mm.
that for myself. So that's been huge for me. And yeah, but it's good
Amazing.
work. It's not always fun, but it's good.
No, I love it. Did you want to tell the audience what you have coming up, if anything exciting for them, and where the listeners can actually go to find you?
Sure. So I have this day because I kind of play those by ear these days, but I have a course coming out on facial hair for
Mm-hmm.
PCOS. I'm just
Yep.
compiling everything I know about that and how to help with that. That should be coming out sometime November or early December of this year, 2023. And then I also have two other PCOS courses that are like self-paced things you can do. One's called PCOS Foundations, one's called Functional PCOS. So if you need help with meal plans and kind of like advice and stuff for your early journey, I think those are great resources. I also run a group program a few times a year with my friend Hannah, who runs the Conscious Nutritionist account. And her and I are going to be running another cohort of our PCOS Essentials Academy starting at the very beginning of 2024. So
Mm.
if you sign up for my newsletter, then you'll get information on that. And if you want to do that, I do have a root cause quiz that your listeners might like, and it'll also sign you up for my newsletter. So I'll send you the link for that.
Perfect. Yeah, awesome. And I'll put all of these links in the show notes for easy access for all of the listeners. But thank you so much, Amber, for coming on and sharing everything that you have with us today. It's actually been such an incredible conversation. And I know that so many people will be walking away with some aha moments or recognizing some areas that they want to start on for themselves in their journey with PCOS.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode with Amber. I really hope that you got some key takeaways from it. I would love to hear what your one top key takeaway was. So just head over to my Instagram, which is KJ Wellness with 3 S's, because as always, I love connecting with every single one of you and having these conversations based on these episodes. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day or the night whenever you're listening to this, and I will chat with you in the next episode very soon. Until then, you take care. Bye.